Back when you started, did you start on foot patrol and then eventually get into patrol cars?
Well, this is how it works.
Okay.
You start on foot.
Okay.
You'll always start on foot, and they give you the lowest of the stuff. But worse than foot patrol, when a radio car gets a DOA or a psycho. Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that today. Now it's EDPs, but they change the names of everything. But you get a psycho, the patrol car would get him to the hospital with the ambulance, but you got to sit in the hospital with him until he's evaluated by a psychiatrist, right? So that's the low part of the job. And then if the police find to get called to a DOA, a dead person, either by a victim of a crime or he died of natural causes, a person dies in their home, you got to sit with the body until the medical examiner shows up, right? And then they declare the body dead, and then they take the body to the morgue. But during that time, the radio car goes back on patrol, and the lowly rookie or probationary officer sits with the dead body in the home or with a psycho in the hospital. So you do that first, and otherwise you're walking around. And then you get to fill in. You're a fill in. Like if a team is working and one guy is out sick or goes on vacation or hurt in the line of duty and is out on an injury, then you fill in on a sector. So you ride with one of the guys who has it. And then you graduate to hooking up with a guy. Maybe his partner retires or gets transferred, and then you get into a radio car. And then the progression from there, if you want, you could take civil service tests and become a sergeant, and then you become a lieutenant and captain. That's called working your way up through the civil service ranks. I didn't do that route. I took the route of becoming plain clothes, which is anti-crime, and then made my way to detective. And in detective, there's 3 grades of detective. Most prestigious is detective first grade. So I became a detective third grade. Then uh, I actually just hung on to that because in 1975, I made detective in 5 years, which back then, today it's normal. Back then it was very, very rare. Back today, guys retire with 20 years. That's it. Very rare does anybody go past 20 years. Back then, they used to even tease you, say you're just a rookie for the first 20 years. Because guys stayed on 35, 40 years was very, very common. You became a cop, that was your life. Today, being a cop is a stepping stone. Guys move on after 20 years. And 20 years in a life of 80 years is, only 25% of your life. Guys do very well in policing, the pay is better, and they move on to high paid security jobs or find other fields or line of businesses that they excel in and do well. And that's just a 20-year gig. So they used to tease us, you're a rookie for 20 years. And guys stayed on a long time. So it was a lifestyle.
But can you finish up on the grades, right? So your
Oh, yeah.
grades,
So I was a third grader
yeah.
and I made it in 5 years, which was unheard of then. And that was 1975. And in 1975, there was a fiscal crisis in New York, and they were going to lay everybody off. And if you had 5 years or less, you were out of work. They were laying you, first time that civil service wasn't a secure job, because that was one of the perks of civil service, that it was secure.
Mm-hmm.
And they were laying guys off, and I got notified that I was going to be laid off. So I told them I have 7 years because I had 2 years as a trainee, but there was no computers. There were no computers. They couldn't check stuff. They knew you were on the police payroll for 5 years. They didn't know if you existed before that. Which was very rare, I saved my paperwork. I saved my pay stubs. So I had to go down to employee relations, which is a unit of the police department that was handling this. And I showed them my pay stubs. I had 2 years. It saved my job.
Wow.
So I got promoted to detective, and then it was a job freeze, basically for like 7 years till 1982 because of the fiscal crisis that New York City was in. So as soon as it really opened up in 82, I got promoted again to detective second grade. And then in '83, I was told in the beginning of the year that I was getting first grade. And let me tell you, back then, this was before there was what called big thing in the city was the merge. That was when transit police, housing police became New York City police. So it was called the big merge of '95. So this was way before then. And first grade is in the city. There was only 115
Out of how many?
out of thousands of detectives.
Yeah, so
And
it's
there was
rare.
only 230 second graders, which I was one of.
Wow.
But it was impossible. Guys died in there. You had to wait for people to die basically because there was, the slots were allocated by how many you could have. You know, you couldn't have more because the city didn't allow it. There was a certain amount of slots to be filled, and when they're filled, that was it. And the same went for how many police were in precincts, how many were in the borough. I'll get into that in a minute because that affected something I wanted to do also. But I was told in '83, due to my record was outstanding by then, that I was getting first grade by the end of the year. Because there were promotions during the year, but Thanksgiving and Christmas is traditionally known for big promotions in the police department. Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I was told I was getting it without a doubt. All my evaluations showed that, and I was told. But then I got hurt in August, and I didn't get first grade.
Yeah.
They treated me very well, the union and the police department and the city. They treated me very well. And I got protection 24 hours a day for the 3 months I was in the hospital, almost 3 months. And when I got out, the union gave me a maid and a chauffeur for 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, because I didn't have a wife at the time. And my girlfriend was working and she was off on weekends. So Monday to Friday, they drove me, did my wash, did my shopping, because I was in a wheelchair. I was taken care of very well. And they carried me, like I said, to January of the following year because there was extra paychecks and Christmas and holiday and uniform pay. So I was taken care of very well, but I didn't get that first grade slot.
Yeah.
And going back to how it affected me, how the city did things, when I got promoted to detective, I was put into 3-4 precinct. That's in Manhattan, which was a very busy house. But being very active, you had to go to court a lot and do your arraignments. And it was at the other end of the borough of Manhattan. And I didn't know Manhattan. And it was a big drive to go downtown. And you'd be stuck in traffic. And their court system was very different. And I didn't know anybody. So I wanted to get back to the Bronx. That was my thing. So I went to people that I knew and I said, listen, could you get me back to the Bronx? I'll work anywhere in the Bronx because I had the whole system down and the DAs knew me. I typed out my own affidavits and they would just sign it. We had our own system. So, and that system effectively let me make multiple arrests in one tour because I could breeze through the system and get back on the street and make more arrests. I've already made 3 individual gun collars in one night, going make a collar, go to court, go back, make a collar, go back, make a collar. But he told me the numbers were slated as they were, they're locked in place. He says, if you got a mutual, I could get you back to the Bronx. And a mutual means that you found a detective that wanted to go to Manhattan so I could go to the Bronx and the numbers would be the same. So what I did on my own time, I did 2 shifts in Manhattan. And then I went into a CIC school, which is required of every detective, which is criminal investigation course. And that's a 2-week course that you take, and it gives you training on the basics of what you had to do as a detective. So while I was in the school, every time I got out of school, I'd go to every Bronx precinct and post it up that I wanted a mutual from any Bronx precinct. I did it to every precinct. I think there's 11 precincts in the Bronx. I'd post it up and see if anyone wanted to go to 3-4, right? But I did that every day because guys have a tendency to take it down, to show it to someone else, or the boss would clear the board. You had to make sure it was up there. So now every day I get out of school, I had to go to every precinct and post this up again. I'd Xerox it and post it up. And then someone picked it up, they wanted to go to 3-4 because their travel was easy for them. They lived in Rockland or something. It was a straight ride down. And I wound up being assigned to the Bronx detectives working out of the 5-2 squad.
Wow.
And that's how I got back to the Bronx. So I really did 2 shifts in Manhattan, and the rest I did in CIC school, and then I got back to the Bronx.
Wow.
But the numbers were locked in place. If they said, I don't know what they were, but let's say there had to be 500 detectives in that area, they wouldn't let it go to 499, no matter what.
Hmm.
You had to get someone to fill that slot so you could move on.